Let us now turn to the topic of cultural models. With these models we try to better understand the phenomenon of culture. Most models are based on one idea, namely that of 3 levels. The first level is the level on which material goods lie. In example, things that are visible or that we can touch. The other 2 levels consist of observable behavior and invisible and very often unconscious basic assumptions such as values and norms. The idea that culture consists of aspects that are visible from the outside and aspects that are hidden deeper is the basic of most common cultural models. The best known of these models is the cultural onion. This onion model was first articulated by the Dutch cultural scientist and social psychologist Geert Hofstede. He uses it to try to explain the different levels of cultural influences. These 3 levels are at different distances from the core of culture and the basic cultural assumptions. By the way, I probably have to point out from a biology point of view that an onion in fact does not have a core. However, we'll assume that there was a core. The closer the levels and their contents are to the outer skin of the onion, the more quickly they can be influenced and changed. Material goods and visible things such as architecture and clothing lie on this outer skin. Below this lies observable behavior. How do people show gratitude? How do they greet each other? Values lie in the middle, so to say in the center. Even those who belong to the culture are rarely explicitly aware of them, and therefore values must be analyzed using suitable methods. Another well-known model for explaining the complexity of culture is the Iceberg model. A very clear distinction is, of course, the surface of the water, which separates the visible from the observable and invisible part. Visible forms of expression are just the tip of the iceberg and therefore the smallest part. These include, for example, architecture, clothing, food and drink, language use, facial expressions and gestures. Areas below the water surface are difficult for people from outside the culture to access. However, their importance can hardly be overestimated because they strongly influence the visible areas of the culture. It is only through knowledge of the existence of these hidden cultural aspects that one can understand a foreign culture. The advantage of the iceberg model is that it clearly shows these hidden parts of culture and indicates how fundamentally important it is to remain particularly sensitive to the invisible and invisible part in intercultural encounters. The areas directly below the water surface contain the non-visible but observable cultural aspects, such as regular celebrations, forms of greeting, roles in the family, dealing with time and space, parenting or management styles. The parts of the iceberg hidden deep below the water are not at all or less easily recognizable. Values, norms, basic assumptions about time and space, the design of relationships and much more shape the cultural identity of an individual and can only be recognized or analyzed to a very limited extent. The onion and iceberg models are criticized because both assume that there are quasi-automatic relationships and influences between the areas. However, extreme caution is required, particularly with automatic classifications. The idea that the individual is determined primarily by his or her culture in a kind of one-way street. But culture is not a cage, and individuals in a globalized and networked world are not exclusively influenced by their own culture. The everyday reality in modern societies, in patchwork families with bicultural identities and immigration histories, can no longer be described by a static and one-dimensional model such as the onion or the iceberg model. The backpack model is a further development by Professor Dr. Juliana Roth from the Ludwig-Maximilians University in Munich. The backpack model maintains a conceptual separation between visible and invisible cultural elements, but assumes that culture is open and it is changeable. People carry their cultural knowledge with them as cultural baggage. However, the way they deal with it is flexible, self-determined and situation-dependent. The individual himself, herself, decides how to deal with the various contents of the cultural backpack. Perhaps according to personal preference, perhaps depending on the situation, and occasionally also due to cultural customs and family traditions. The backpack model or the content of the backpack can also be changed and expanded, let's say. The deeply stored contents of the backpack, which originates from early childhood, family influences and home, can be expanded over the course of a lifetime. These three models are not contradictory. Different situations are explained by different models in situations where people with different cultural backgrounds meet. The onion or iceberg model can often help. In these situations, exchange students, management staff, refugees or volunteers meet. The onion and iceberg models can be particularly helpful in the understanding each other at the beginning of the respective contact. These models can be particularly helpful at the beginning of a qualification in intercultural competence. As the training progresses, the need for more complex, non-static and dynamic models for understanding culture arises quite automatically. You're probably already filling your personal backpack and also your learning backpack, of course. Other topics related to the topic of culture models are the topic of culture itself, as well as the topic of identity, for which there are further short videos. On YouTube, I encourage you to leave your remarks in the comment section and of course to like and to subscribe, and I look forward to your valued cooperation and feedback on the seminar on the online learning platform.